On my wedding day, my future mother-in-law pulled me aside and said, "You'll never be good enough for my son." She smirked, thinking I'd back out. But as the wedding march started, I walked down the aisle, with a decision that left everyone in shock. On my wedding day, just moments before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, my future mother-in-law pulled me aside. Her perfectly manicured fingers gripped my wrist, her polished smile never wavering as she leaned in close. "You'll never be good enough for my son," she whispered, her voice laced with quiet malice. For a second the world around me blurred. The distant sound of the wedding march playing outside, the soft murmurs of guests awaiting my entrance, the floral scent of the extravagant bouquets, it all faded. My chest tightened, but I refused to let her see me falter. Hey everyone! Power moves are made in silence, but victories deserve to be seen. Hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey where strategy, resilience, and unexpected twists shape every story. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Margaret Sinclair, the woman who had spent months pretending to tolerate me, had finally removed her mask. I met her gaze, unflinching, refusing to let her words pierce through my resolve. She smirked as if expecting me to crumble, expecting me to run out of the church humiliated. But she underestimated me. Instead of pulling away, I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that I knew unsettled her. "We'll see about that," I said, my voice steady, my heart hammering with something far more powerful than hurt, determination. She straightened, her eyes narrowing slightly. For the first time she seemed unsure, as if she had miscalculated her own move. But before she could say anything else, the wedding coordinator peeked into the room. "It's time." I turned on my heel and walked toward the double doors, feeling Margaret's eyes burn into my back. Every step down that aisle was a silent declaration. I wasn't leaving. Not today. Not ever. The grand hall was filled with people, all standing as I made my entrance. My dress trailed behind me, the delicate lace shimmering under the golden glow of the chandeliers. I could feel the weight of their gazes, but I focused only on one person, Ethan. He stood at the altar, looking at me with admiration and love, oblivious to the quiet battle that had just taken place. His dark blue eyes softened as I approached, his lips curving into a reassuring smile. I could almost believe that this moment was untouched by the storm brewing around us. As I reached him, he took my hands in his, squeezing gently. "You look breathtaking," he whispered. I smiled, though my mind was elsewhere. Margaret thought she had won. She thought her words would shake me, make me doubt myself. But she had only given me more reason to stay, more reason to fight. The officiant began speaking, his voice a steady rhythm in the background as I locked eyes with the woman seated in the front row, Margaret. She watched me closely, waiting for a misstep, waiting for the moment I would reveal weakness. I would give her none. As the ceremony progressed, my mind whirled with possibilities. Margaret's disdain for me wasn't just a passing dislike. It was a calculated strategy. She had been planting seeds of doubt, whispering into Ethan's ear, trying to turn him against me. I had overheard her once, late at night, telling him that I was after his wealth, that my background wasn't suitable for someone of his status. I had spent months proving myself, showing him that my love was real. He believed me, but I knew his mother still had a hold on him, her influence stretching like invisible threads. As Ethan slid the ring onto my finger, I made a silent promise to myself. This was no longer just a wedding. It was the beginning of something far greater, a game that Margaret didn't realize she had already started. The moment the officiant declared us husband and wife, the applause erupted. Ethan pulled me close, his lips brushing against mine, sealing our vows. The world around us blurred into a haze of celebration, but I remained acutely aware of the woman watching from the sidelines. Margaret Sinclair may have tried to break me, but she had only fueled something much stronger. She had underestimated the wrong woman. As the celebration continued, I played my part flawlessly. I smiled, danced, and accepted congratulations from guests who barely knew me beyond the carefully curated image Margaret had allowed them to see. The grandeur of the reception was undeniable. Golden chandeliers bathed the room in a soft glow, crystal glasses clinked with endless toasts, and waiters carried trays of the finest delicacies. It was a night meant to be unforgettable, yet beneath the surface, something far more sinister simmered. Margaret kept her distance, but her presence was inescapable. She was watching, calculating, waiting for the moment I would falter. But I had no intention of giving her that satisfaction. Every time our eyes met, I made sure to hold her gaze a little longer than necessary, a silent challenge lingering between us. Ethan remained blissfully unaware of the unspoken war taking place in the background. He held me close, whispering affectionate words in my ear, making promises of a future I wasn't sure was entirely in my control. I wanted to believe in us, in the love that had led to this moment, but I knew better. Love alone wouldn't be enough to survive Margaret's machinations. It was only when the final guests had departed, and we returned to the lavish estate Ethan called home, that the illusion began to crack. As I stepped into the master bedroom, still in my wedding gown, I caught sight of an envelope resting on the dresser. My name was scrawled in Margaret's unmistakable handwriting. Curious but wary, I unfolded the letter. The words struck like a blow. By now, you must know this marriage is built on nothing but a fragile illusion. Ethan will always trust me more than he trusts you. And when the time comes, he will choose me. Walk away while you still have dignity left. Or stay and watch everything crumble. My hands tightened around the paper, my pulse thrumming with unspoken fury. She was relentless, but so was I. I would not cower. I would not run. I had already made my choice. The next few weeks should have been blissful. Honeymoon phases were supposed to be filled with romance and happiness, but ours was tainted with Margaret's looming influence. I started noticing small things at first. Ethan hesitating when I brought up financial decisions, his sudden need to double-check with his mother before making choices about our future, and the way his demeanor changed when Margaret's name entered a conversation. Then came the whispers. I overheard them one evening, voices carrying through the slightly ajar office door. She needs to understand her place, Ethan. You've known her for what, a couple of years? I raised you. I know what's best for you. Mom, stop. Lena loves me. This isn't. She loves the life you provide. That's different. I have the documents, Ethan. You don't have to take my word for it. Silence. I pressed my hand against the wall, heart pounding. Documents? What was she talking about? A chair scraped against the hardwood floor, and I quickly moved before I could be caught eavesdropping. Moments later, Ethan emerged, his expression unreadable. He didn't mention the conversation. Instead, he pulled me close, kissing my forehead, but something in his touch felt distant. That night, as he slept beside me, I slipped out of bed and made my way to his office. I had no choice. If Margaret had planted doubts, I needed to know what they were. The desk drawer was locked. Of course it was. But Ethan wasn't the only one with secrets. I had seen where he kept the spare key. With careful movements, I retrieved it and unlocked the drawer, pulling out a neatly stacked file labeled with my name. As I flipped through the pages, my stomach tightened. It was a collection of financial records, old debts from before I met Ethan, twisted narratives making it seem like I had deliberately positioned myself to marry into wealth. Some of it was true. I had struggled, but I had worked hard to rebuild my life. Margaret had taken fragments of my past and crafted a story that painted me as an opportunist. And Ethan had seen this. Had he believed it? The thought sent a cold wave through me. I placed everything back as I had found it and returned to bed, lying awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. The next morning I waited. I watched Ethan, studied his mannerisms, the way his gaze flickered when I mentioned our future, the slight hesitation when I touched him. Margaret's poison was working. I could feel the shift happening beneath my feet, and I knew if I didn't act soon I would lose everything. But I refused to let Margaret win. The first step was securing my place. I had to make Ethan see me as indispensable, as someone he couldn't function without. So I played my role, the perfect wife, attentive, loving, understanding. I eased his burdens, handled things before he could ask, made myself a necessity in his life. Margaret was waiting for me to lash out, to confront Ethan with anger, to give him a reason to doubt me further. I wouldn't give her that. Instead, I started digging. I spent weeks charming the estate staff, gathering small pieces of information, forming a picture of the secrets Margaret never thought I'd uncover. And then I found it. A transaction buried under layers of business accounts. Money wired from a private account linked to Margaret to a so-called investigator. A name I recognized. The same investigator who had put together the file on me. She hadn't just stumbled upon my past. She had fabricated parts of it. I had proof. But I wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. Because Margaret thought she was winning. She thought she was turning Ethan against me, dismantling my place in his life piece by piece. What she didn't realize was that every move she made only gave me more power. So I waited. I let her think she was ahead. And when the time was right, I would make my move. The battle had only just begun. Margaret believed she had the upper hand. She had manipulated Ethan, planted doubts, and twisted my past into a narrative that suited her agenda. But what she failed to realize was that I had already begun my counterattack. I wasn't the same woman she had dismissed as an unworthy outsider. I had patience, intelligence, and above all an unwavering resolve to win this war. Every morning I played the role of the devoted wife. I greeted Ethan with soft kisses, prepared his favorite breakfast, and listened intently as he spoke about his work. I made myself indispensable, ensuring that every moment of his life was woven with my presence. If Margaret wanted to pull him away from me, she would have to work much harder. Yet beneath the surface I was setting my own traps. I had gained the trust of the estate staff, housekeepers, security personnel, even the family lawyer. People talked when they believed you were harmless, and soon enough whispers of Margaret's misdeeds began to reach my ears. I learned of her secret meetings with business associates she swore had been cut off, of financial transactions she had deliberately concealed, and of whispered conversations about Ethan's inheritance. One evening as I walked into the study, I found Ethan hunched over a stack of papers, his expression tense. He didn't notice me at first, too lost in whatever documents lay before him. When he finally looked up, his eyes carried uncertainty. "My mother showed me some things about you," he admitted hesitantly. I feigned confusion. "What kind of things?" "She said you hid your financial struggles from me. That you married me because you saw a way out of your problems." His voice was soft, almost unsure, as if he himself wasn't convinced. I met his gaze, forcing every ounce of emotion into my words. "Ethan, if money was all I cared about, why would I still be here after everything she's done to push me away?" He hesitated, but I could see the battle in his mind. Margaret's words against the truth he had always known about me. "I don't know what to believe," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. That was all I needed. Doubt. If Margaret had planted a seed, I had just started to uproot it. That night while Ethan slept, I made my next move. I had carefully gathered evidence of Margaret's underhanded dealings, and it was time to use it. The documents I had uncovered showed that she had been misusing company funds, redirecting them into private accounts under different names. If this information surfaced at the right moment, it would do more than just tarnish her reputation. It would dismantle her control. Instead of acting rashly, I started small. I leaked pieces of information anonymously to close associates of Ethan's father, the real power players in the family business. Within days, the whispers of Margaret's questionable financial moves had begun circulating. She was still in the dark, unaware that her own game was now turning against her. Meanwhile, I kept Ethan close. I subtly questioned why his mother was so involved in his decisions, why he constantly sought her approval when we were supposed to be building a life together. He began to notice the way she interfered, the way she controlled every aspect of our marriage from the shadows. Then came the dinner party. Margaret had invited an elite circle of associates, her closest allies. She walked through the halls as if she owned the very foundation we stood on. She had no idea that by the end of the night her power would begin to slip. As we sat at the long, polished dining table, laughter and conversation filling the room, I seized my moment. "Margaret, I heard something quite interesting the other day," I said sweetly, watching her carefully. She barely spared me a glance. "Oh. And what might that be?" I was speaking with one of Ethan's father's old business partners. He mentioned an unusual set of transactions linked to Sinclair Enterprises. I took a casual sip of wine, pretending not to notice the way her spine stiffened. The room fell silent. Even Ethan turned to me, his expression unreadable. "I'm sure it was nothing," I added, setting my glass down. "But it did make me wonder, how much do we really know about the company's finances?" Margaret's face remained poised, but I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. He knew. She knew I had something. After the party, she cornered me in the hallway. "You're playing a dangerous game, Lena," she whispered, her voice controlled but sharp. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Am I?" She exhaled, barely restraining her frustration. "You don't belong here. You never have. And I will not stand by while you manipulate my son." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. The difference between us, Margaret, is that I don't need to manipulate Ethan. He's starting to see you for who you really are. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there for once without a witty retort. From that moment on, the shift was undeniable. Ethan became distant from his mother, his trust in her wavering as he started to question the things she had told him. And Margaret? She was losing her grip. But this wasn't the end. No, this was just the beginning of her downfall. Margaret was unraveling, and I could see it in the way her carefully curated mask cracked whenever she thought no one was watching. The once poised matriarch now fumbled through conversations, her sharp words lacking their usual precision. Ethan was beginning to see through her, his trust in her influence eroding with each passing day. But I wasn't satisfied yet. I wanted to ensure she never had the power to hurt me, or Ethan, again. The whispers in high society had grown louder, curiosity turning into suspicion. Margaret's financial dealings had become a topic of hushed conversations at luncheons and social gatherings. I knew this because I had planted the seeds myself. A few calculated remarks to the right people had spread like wildfire, and now, those who once admired her were beginning to keep their distance. Ethan too had started questioning things. His once unwavering loyalty to his mother was shaken, and I took every opportunity to solidify that doubt. I reminded him of the prenup she had orchestrated behind my back, the way she had meddled in our marriage before it even began, and the file of twisted narratives she had presented to him. He listened, though he never outright admitted that he regretted believing her. But I could see it. The guilt lingered in his eyes. One evening as I entered his office, I found him staring at his laptop, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He hesitated before turning the screen towards me. It was an email from the family lawyer. Ethan had been requested to review some irregularities in the company's financial records. "She's been shifting money," he murmured, rubbing his temple. "I don't understand why." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. "She's always been protective of the company," I said carefully. "Maybe she didn't want you to find out." His jaw clenched. "She should have told me." The next day, Ethan arranged a meeting with the board. Margaret had no idea what was coming. When she arrived at the Sinclair Enterprises headquarters, she walked into the conference room with the same confidence she had always carried. She greeted the board members with polite smiles, completely unaware that the very people she had spent years manipulating were about to turn against her. Ethan didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a folder across the polished table. "Explain this." Margaret's expression didn't falter at first. She opened the file, skimming through the pages, but I saw it. The brief moment of panic that flashed across her face before she quickly masked it. "I don't know what you're insinuating," she said smoothly, closing the folder as if the contents were insignificant. Ethan leaned forward. "I'm insinuating that you've been moving company funds into private accounts. Accounts that don't belong to Sinclair Enterprises." A hush fell over the room. Margaret laughed, though it sounded hollow. "Ethan, darling, you're misunderstanding." "I'm not," he interrupted. His voice was firm, unyielding. "The evidence is all here. Transactions traced back to accounts under your name. This isn't a misunderstanding, Mother. This is deception." For the first time, Margaret looked uncertain. She glanced around the room, realizing that the people she once controlled were no longer on her side. I remained silent, watching her squirm, knowing that this was only the beginning. "I did it for the company," she finally said, her voice quieter. "To protect our legacy." Ethan exhaled sharply. "No, you did it for yourself." The board members exchanged wary glances, waiting to see how this would play out. Margaret had been a powerful force in the company for years, but now her influence was slipping through her fingers. Ethan took a deep breath as if making a final decision. "You need to step down." The words were like a slap. Margaret's composure wavered, her lips parting as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I am," Ethan said firmly. "This is the best way to avoid a public scandal. Resign and we'll keep this matter private." Margaret looked at me then, her gaze sharp and accusing as if she knew I had orchestrated this. Maybe she was right. But it didn't matter anymore. She had lost. Days later, the news was announced discreetly. Margaret Sinclair was stepping down from Sinclair Enterprises due to personal reasons. The official statement painted it as a peaceful transition, but behind closed doors she was livid. "You think you've won," she spat at me one evening when we were alone. I tilted my head, offering her a small smile. "Haven't I?" She clenched her fists, but there was nothing left for her to do. Her power had been dismantled piece by piece, her influence reduced to nothing more than fading whispers. Ethan, now fully aware of his mother's true nature, had distanced himself. The once unbreakable bond between them was now strained, possibly beyond repair. And I had secured my place. But Margaret wasn't the type to disappear quietly. I knew she would try to strike back. The only question was, how? Margaret may have been forced out of Sinclair Enterprises, but she wasn't finished. The resignation had been public, but her bitterness was private, festering in the shadows. I could feel her hatred in the way she avoided my gaze at social events, in the tense silence whenever we were in the same room. She had lost the battle, but she wasn't the kind of woman to accept defeat easily. I wasn't naive. I knew she would strike back. It was only a matter of time. For weeks things were quiet. Too quiet. Ethan and I settled into a routine, one that no longer revolved around his mother's presence. He still spoke to her occasionally, but the conversations were short, tense. He was beginning to understand that she had controlled his life for too long, that her influence had been more suffocating than supportive. It was a shift I had worked hard for, and I wasn't about to let her undo it. Then the rumors started. It began subtly, a hushed conversation that ended abruptly when I walked into the room, a curious glance exchanged between guests at a charity gala. Whispers that I was hearing but not quite understanding. I knew Margaret was behind it before I even had proof. She was planting something meant to discredit me, to turn Ethan against me in the same way I had turned him against her. One evening Ethan came home looking troubled. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom, his expression unreadable. "There's something I need to ask you," he said, his voice measured. I set down the book I had been pretending to read and met his gaze. "What is it?" He hesitated. "Someone told me, they said you've been meeting with my business rivals. That you've been passing information." A slow, cold anger spread through me. Margaret was playing dirty. I exhaled, forcing calm into my voice. "And do you believe them?" He shook his head immediately. "No. But I need to know why people are saying this." I stood, closing the distance between us. "Because your mother is desperate, Ethan. She's trying to destroy me the way she tried to destroy us. And if you let her, she'll win." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I don't want to believe she'd go this far." I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "She already has." He sighed, nodding slowly. "Then we need to end this." The word sent a thrill through me. He had said we. Not I. Not you. We. The next morning I put my final plan into motion. Margaret had underestimated how far I was willing to go to secure my place. She had thought I was merely playing defense, but she was wrong. I had been building my offensive strategy all along. I reached out to an old acquaintance. Someone Margaret had crossed in her ruthless climb to the top. A former investor she had betrayed years ago, leaving him humiliated and financially ruined. He still carried a grudge, and I knew he would be eager for payback. Within days, whispers turned into accusations. The same circles that once feared Margaret now whispered about her dealings. The evidence I had been collecting, her financial misdeeds, her manipulations, her attempts to frame me, was carefully leaked to the right people. Then the final blow. At an exclusive fundraising event, Margaret arrived in her finest designer gown, smiling as if she still held power in a world that had begun to turn against her. She didn't know that, behind the scenes, her fate had already been sealed. The moment came when a journalist approached her, microphone in hand. "Mrs. Sinclair, there have been allegations about financial misconduct in Sinclair Enterprises. Do you have a comment?" The color drained from her face. She composed herself quickly, her smile tightening. "I have no idea what you're talking about." The journalist pressed on. "Multiple sources claim that money was moved through hidden accounts. And there are also rumors that you attempted to sabotage your own daughter-in-law by spreading false information. Would you like to address that?" Margaret's carefully constructed image shattered. I watched from across the room, sipping my champagne as the realization dawned on her. She wasn't untouchable anymore. Over the next few weeks she lost everything. The remaining board members at Sinclair Enterprises distanced themselves, her social circle shrank, and soon, even the invitations to exclusive events stopped coming. Margaret Sinclair was no longer a force to be reckoned with, she was an outcast. Ethan and I never spoke of her downfall in detail, but he knew. He knew I had orchestrated it, even if he never asked how. And I knew he didn't want to know. One afternoon I found a letter slipped under our front door. No name, but I didn't need one. You won this round. But don't ever forget, victory comes with a price. And I will be watching. I smiled, folding the letter carefully. He could watch all she wanted. But she would never rise again. I held the letter between my fingers, my grip tightening slightly as I reread the words. You won this round. But don't ever forget, victory comes with a price. And I will be watching. Margaret's handwriting was as elegant as ever, her message laced with a quiet menace that barely hid the bitterness beneath. I folded the letter, tucking it away in my desk drawer, but I didn't throw it out. It wasn't fear that made me keep it, it was curiosity. A reminder that despite her downfall, Margaret Sinclair wasn't a woman who simply faded into obscurity. She would try again. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. Weeks passed and life returned to something that resembled normalcy. Margaret had been erased from high society. Invitations that once arrived at her doorstep were now being sent to me instead. Those who had once whispered in her ear now sought my approval. Ethan had fully distanced himself, and though I knew there was still a lingering ache in him for the mother he had idolized for so long, he never spoke of her again. One evening, as I sat in the dimly lit study, sipping tea while reviewing some documents for a charity I had recently taken over, one that used to be Margaret's pet project, my phone vibrated. A message. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. Did you really think it would be that easy? My lips curved slightly. I should have expected this. Margaret had been quiet for too long, and silence had never been her nature. She had lost her throne, but she hadn't disappeared. And now she was making her first move. I didn't reply. Instead, I placed my phone down, exhaling slowly. She wanted me to react, to feel a flicker of unease, to believe that she still had control. But she was mistaken. I had spent too long carefully dismantling her power, ensuring that every advantage she once held had crumbled beneath her feet. There was nothing left for her to cling to, or so I thought. The first sign that she was still dangerous came a few days later. Ethan received a call from one of his company's board members. They wanted to discuss a sensitive matter. When he returned home that evening, his face was unreadable. "She's trying to get back in," he said finally, setting his phone down on the marble counter. I feigned surprise. "How?" "She's been reaching out to investors, trying to regain some influence. She's claiming she was forced out unfairly." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Some of them are listening." I nodded slowly, hiding the flicker of amusement beneath my composed expression. Margaret was playing a predictable game. She had nothing tangible left, so she was attempting to manipulate the narrative, turning herself into the victim. "Do you think she has any real leverage?" I asked carefully. Ethan hesitated. "Not legally. But perception matters. If she convinces the right people that she was wronged, she could make things difficult." I set my teacup down gently. "Then we make sure she doesn't." Ethan glanced at me, his brow furrowing slightly. "Lena, what exactly did you do?" I smiled. "Nothing I can't handle." I spent the next week making quiet moves, ensuring that anyone considering siding with Margaret thought twice. I met with the investors she had reached out to, subtly reminding them of the chaos she had caused in Sinclair Enterprises, the instability she had brought. I didn't need to threaten anyone. I simply let the truth speak for itself. And when that wasn't enough, I used the final piece of leverage I had been saving. There was something Margaret had hidden even from Ethan. An old misstep, something buried deep enough that she had convinced herself it would never surface. A business dealing gone wrong, one that had nearly resulted in a public scandal years ago. She had paid to make it disappear, but money couldn't erase the past completely. With a carefully placed tip to the right journalist, whispers turned into headlines. Margaret Sinclair, the once unshakable force, was now under scrutiny. The investors who had considered aligning with her quickly backed away, not wanting to be associated with someone whose reputation was now tainted beyond repair. She had nothing left. The final time I saw her was at a charity gala. A public event that she had once dominated, now reduced to nothing more than an outsider looking in. She wasn't there as a guest but as a shadow watching from the edges of the room, unnoticed by most. But I noticed her. As I walked past, I paused just long enough to meet her gaze. She didn't speak. Neither did I. He didn't have to. We both knew this was the end of the game. That night, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Ethan joined me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "It's over, isn't it?" he murmured against my hair. I leaned back against him, gazing at the skyline. "Yes," I said softly. "It's over." Margaret had spent years ruling from the top, believing she was untouchable. But in the end, it wasn't rage or direct confrontation that had undone her. It was patience. Precision. A carefully played game that she had never realized she was losing until it was too late. I had won. And I never had to lift a single weapon to do it.